One of the things that really fascinates me about your work is when there are conditions in the world that you help with functional medicine, and maybe we discuss the topic of COVID and how people really, really suffered during that time, be it with the vaccinations or getting the COVID and recovering. It's been tough for all of us. Now, how did you help out
Well,
with the COVID?
I think that the thing about COVID is that information is the way to minimize the damage caused by COVID. And so I have been in the position of Chief of Medical Affairs for Institute for Functional Medicine, and actually led the projects for teaching doctors and also outreach to the world on COVID. And people can still get some of that information at the IFM website, which is ifm.org/COVID. And the most important piece about COVID is that the damage was, number one, from the virus, but also from the isolation. Because isolation is really, really bad for people. And we know through studies that losing social connection and feeling isolated and feeling alone is as bad for the body as being overweight and having high blood pressure and high cholesterol combined. So social isolation is horrible. In fact, when I first started seeing that data, I almost wanted to write a book on it, because that's how important social isolation is, and in terms of bad health. So we all became isolated in COVID. And that still happens a little bit when people are now working from home because their offices have shut down. And, like for me, for example, most of my work is remote. And I miss, going to the office and working with people one-on-one. So I've become more isolated by not having that. And then what do I do in return? I mean, because of that, is I make sure to stay in regular contact with my social circle. So I just don't call when I think about it. I make sure that I'm always having regular calls. I'm meeting people regularly for meals, because I have to compensate for the fact that I do so much remote and virtual work. So COVID has created social isolation. The other thing about COVID is that most people don't know, but when I say this, they just nod their head and they go, oh, this makes sense, is the healthier you are before you're exposed to the virus, the less likely you are to get COVID. And if you get COVID, you're likely to have a better and less severe infection with COVID, and less likely to get chronic or long COVID. So everybody says, yes, that makes sense, but it's not what we say top of mind, or not in everyone's mind, because people, even with COVID, don't do what they can to take care of themselves. So though people may, let's say, take some vitamins, and we'll go through the vitamins that are good for COVID, they'll take vitamins with one hand, and if they're diabetic, have a croissant in the other, and not realize that having that croissant and ruining their blood sugar makes them more likely to get sick and die from COVID. And so if I had to choose between a diabetic taking supplements and a diabetic lowering their blood sugar, I want that diabetic to lower their blood sugar. So people don't behave that way because it's not explained to them in a strong enough message through public health, etc. It's mentioned as a single sentence. It's always overlooked. And it's also the natural tendency that people want to know the supplements that they should take. And when you think about, the COVID virus and how it binds in the heart and all these places where there are what we call the ACE2 receptors, you don't want to have a lot of ACE2 receptors in the body. And those receptors are, in the heart and the lungs. So you want your heart and your lungs to be as healthy as possible. So if you're a smoker, that's not a good thing for a respiratory virus. So you want to decrease your smoking, or eliminate it. So these are the common sense things that I think are very important.
Even if they're common sense, the thing is they overlook them. They're just used to what they do and they do it. And then they say, oh, my immunity is down. Well, it's down because of the trail.
Right.